Live from downtown Detroit, Local 4 News at 11 starts now.
People living in Harper Woods were set to come out tonight to battle against pot shops near their homes, but found this sign on the door. What that sign doesn't say is why. Well, tonight we know why. The city of Harper Woods was sued this afternoon. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Kimberly Gill.
I'm Devin Skillian. One of the marijuana businesses vying for a license filing a lawsuit against the city asking for a temporary restraining order to halt the whole process. Mara McDonald live tonight in Harper Woods. Figuring out what to do with marijuana has been a rough road there, as it has been in many other communities, Mara.
Devin, it sure has. And I mean, consider this a bump in that road. You have all these people coming here tonight, and this is what they see on the door.
Hi, the meeting is canceled, unfortunately.
People in Harper Woods showed up tonight to find the meeting canceled, but their neighbors were out there to give them the skinny on what had gone down over the last 24 hours. The city is being sued over how it opted to hand out weed licenses. Lawyers for Altum LLC, which was trying to get one of those licenses, filing suit and asking for a temporary restraining order. Neighbors who have been battling the city council over how weed should be handled here, well, they tell me they're not surprised.
What's not acceptable is there was a total lack of transparency from the very beginning and a complete lack of communication on what their plans were and a total disregard for what residents feel.
Here's what's played out since August of last year when the city council got a packed house, neighbors on fire over the idea the city was going to vote to do away with a required 1,500-foot buffer between pot shops.
I'd like to invite you over to my house so you can see exactly what you are proposing, how it will affect our neighborhood.
Neighbors pushed back hard enough. The council didn't do away with that buffer. And it's been working on how to fit marijuana into the city ever since and decided to award 3 pot licenses in total and do it on a first-come, first-served basis. That system has worked in other communities. The day they did it in Harper Woods, it turned into a decathlon sprint to the door, which one neighbor told me was absurd. Now, one of those who didn't make the cut is trying to stop this process in its tracks, suggesting it should be merit-based versus something out of a track meet. Back here live, so what happens next? The lawsuit, it's headed to court on the 14th. We'll see what happens there and stay on top of it. Meanwhile, I called the city this afternoon, specifically to the city manager. My call has not yet been returned. We're live in Harper Woods tonight. I'm Mara McDonald, Local 4.
Goodness me. All right, Mara. Now to a crime that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it costs tens of millions of dollars every year.
As Jacqueline Francis explains, a restaurant in Howell is putting a spotlight on what it is and why it matters.
We're out back here at Griff's Grill near the dumpsters, an area where you wouldn't really think there'd be anything valuable enough worth stealing, but in fact there is, and this time it was caught on camera.
We're closed on Sunday, so I was here on Sunday doing my work that I do, and I see that white pumper truck pull up.
Right away, Joe Matley knew something was up.
I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing? He's at the wrong place or something, you know.
Matley, the owner of Griff's Grill in Howell, had a feeling he was there to steal his used kitchen grease, stored in this back container.
What are you doing here? I said, you're not here just trying to steal my grease, are you? And he looks at me, and that's when he gets out of the truck, and he walks over, and he looks at the sticker on the front. He's like, oh, I'm with Darpro. I'm like, really?
As suspected, Matley said he wasn't with the company. He was there to steal the used grease. While it's not exactly liquid gold, the used cooking oil that gets tossed from restaurants at the end of the day does have some value.
20, 30 years ago, we used to have to pay companies to pick it up and get rid of it. Then they started figuring out, hey, we can make biodiesel fuel out of it. We can, refine it and use it into a lot of things.
Now, companies like Darpro pay the restaurants $100 or $200 to come pick up the grease every month. Then they sell the grease to recyclers.
I talked to Darpro, the company, this morning, and they told me that it's a big black market business.
Darpro estimates $75 million worth of used cooking oil is stolen each year.
It's not that big of a deal, but being a small independent business guy, which a lot of the places are around here, every little bit counts. Don't steal from me.
This time the truck got away and it didn't have a license plate, but the owner did make a police report and put out a warning on social media so other restaurants can keep an eye out. Reporting in Howell, Jacqueline Francis, Local 4.
Okay, Jacqueline. Cleanup efforts continue tonight in Grand Blanc after a rare tornado rips through the city.
National Weather Service confirming today an EF2 tornado touchdown in Bicentennial Park. That was about 1:12 this morning, just off I-75 and Grand Blanc Road. It traveled for 10 minutes, causing destruction along a path that was nearly 6 miles long. You're looking at some of the damage here that was left behind. Residents described for us what they heard and felt as it blew through.
We thought an airplane was coming through from the sound of the roar. And when we went to the back door to look outside, we seen the tornado actually swirling through our backyard.
Yeah, Consumers Energy still working tonight to restore power to many of those that were left without it after the storm.
Over the last 36 hours, there's been a dramatic shift between severe weather and the drastic temperature change across the state.
Let's bring in Kim Adams now. Kim, obviously anything can happen around these parts, but this is even for us, this is pretty dramatic.
Right? Yeah. Even, I mean, you know, blink and the weather changes in Michigan. It's always the saying that we have, but this is a bit extreme. This is dramatic even for us, and we're pretty dramatic here with our weather. There's been quite a change over the last 24 hours, as I'm sure you felt if you've been outside at all this afternoon or this evening. In the last 24 hours, we've seen temperatures drop by a good 30 to 40 degrees. In fact, right now it is 37 degrees colder than it was this same time last night, 35 degrees colder at the airport and near 40 degrees colder out in Ann Arbor. So we had temperatures yesterday in the 70s in the afternoon, then we dropped down to the 60s. We tied a record overnight, which was 64 degrees before those temperatures started to plummet behind the cold front. So we're now in the 20s, but it doesn't really tell the story because we've also had some wind to deal with. So our wind chills are in the single digits and the low teens, and that's where they'll be tomorrow morning. So the weather story, we're only going to make it into the 30s. Look at these morning wind chills. When you're headed off to work, it will feel like it's 2 in Lapeer, 4 in Pontiac, 6 in Mount Clemens, and 9 downtown. We're not under an advisory anymore for wind, but we'll still have some windy conditions, just not to the advisory criteria level, but they'll still be gusting about 25 miles per hour. That's going to keep our wind chills in the 20s tomorrow. We are not done with the 60-degree weather, and I'll talk about our pretty big warm-up ahead for the weekend coming up.
Okay, Kim. New at 11, a Warren man is charged after allegedly running over an elderly woman with a snowplow.
Yeah, prosecutors say 45-year-old Jason Welkley was driving the plow drunk when he ran over the woman as she walked to her car. She later died. Happened January 15th in a parking lot near 15 Mile Road in Fraser. Welkley faces several charges, including drunk driving, and faces up to 15 years in prison.
Charges are filed in the deadly dog mauling of a Detroit man. Roy and Trevina Goodman are each charged with 1 count of dangerous animal causing death in connection to the death of Harold Phillips. The attack happened January 29th in the area of West Chicago and Longacre. Prosecutors say the father of 6 was walking home from the bus stop when 3 dogs got out of an unsecured gate in the Goodman's yard. Phillips was hospitalized after the attack and later died. The 3 dogs involved have been euthanized.
The Supreme Court has decided to hear Donald Trump's immunity claim in the election interference case. In a brief order, the Supreme Court said it would hear arguments and issue their ruling as the case goes on hold in the meantime, meaning no trial can take place. SCOTUS set to hear the case on April 22nd. Could take weeks or months to actually resolve the issue. We don't know when a decision would be released. If Donald Trump loses, the trial would not take place until well into election season. If Donald Trump wins this at the Supreme Court level, then the charges would be dismissed.
Detroit Police Chief James White joins other law enforcement leaders at the White House for a meeting with President Biden. One topic discussed was Detroit's historic crime reductions in the year 2023, including the city marking the fewest homicides since 1966. Both President Biden and Chief White said crime rates skyrocketed during the pandemic, but funding from the American Rescue Plan helped make significant progress.
As of yesterday, we are looking at an 18% reduction in homicides for 2024, as opposed to last year this time, 30% reduction in non-fatal shootings, a 47% reduction in carjackings, and we are focused on building on the progress that we've already had.
Because the American Rescue Plan, we have the largest federal investment in fighting crime and preventing violent crime in any time in our history. And that's a big deal.
During his speech, Chief White also applauded the steps his department has made when it comes to addressing mental health crises, including having mental health professionals stationed in 911 dispatches.
There is a deal on Capitol Hill to avoid a government shutdown, at least for now. Congressional leaders announced a plan this evening to push back Friday's deadline by another week. The goal is to fund half the government spending bills by March 8th, the other half by mid-March. The initial deadlines had been March 1st and March 8th, but they want to buy Congress more time to pass a funding deal. Still, the House and Senate need to pass the stopgap measure by the end of Friday in order to avert a partial shutdown.